Okay, so this was a few years ago now. I was 15 at the time. It was homecoming dance, and I had this really big crush on this guy from my friend group. We were all going as a group, but I was really excited to possibly dance with the crush. My dad didn't really want me to go, and told me he wouldn't be picking me up after the dance if I went because it was too late. It would just be about 11 p.m. by the time it finished. But I was just so excited to dance with my crush. I was like, whatever, I'll find my own way back. I was planning on taking the city bus. The dance was amazing. I had my first kiss. It was magic for my little 15-year-old self. After this dance, I'm walking to the mall/Walmart because that's where the bus stop is. I'm on cloud 9 when I realize the buses are not running anymore. At this point, I had no phone and I'm kind of just standing awkwardly outside of Walmart thinking of what to do next. I didn't want to call my dad because I figured he'd be really mad at me, but to walk home would take me almost 2 hours, and I was only wearing a little formal dress, and it's 11:30 at night at this point. As I'm pondering all this, a man pulls up in a car and says, "Hey, are you okay?" I figured I looked stressed because I was feeling pretty stressed. I forget what I had responded, but he said, "Well, I can give you a ride if you want." He sounded friendly enough, so I was like, well, maybe. I'll just take the drive. As I'm walking to the car, alarms start going off in my head, and everything in me is telling me to stop and not get in the car. So I start backing away and I say, "Actually, I'm good. It's okay." He insists it's okay and he'll drive me. I say, "No, it's okay." He drives away, but I see him circle back and come back up to me. "You sure you don't want to ride?" I say, "No, it's okay." I'm now starting to shake and feel really afraid. I walk as fast as I can to the nearest payphone, which is in the parking lot of McDonald's, and I call my dad. I'm crying and apologizing, and just begging him to come get me. My dad said he'll come get me, so I hang up. As I hang up, I notice the car has followed me to the parking lot. So I call one of my friends and ask him just to stay on the phone with me until my dad shows up. Luckily, my dad showed up and everything was fine, but I do wonder what would have happened. Hello, this is my first time posting about something like this on Reddit, so do forgive me if my formatting is wrong. I'm currently 18, but in this situation, it happened in 2021. At the time I was 16, it was the afternoon, around 3:30 p.m. I was returning home from my tuition classes. At the time, there was a high spread of COVID-19, so school was happening online. But I had no other options than just to go take the notes from my teacher, as there was an important exam we had nearby. Normally, I wasn't allowed to go outside because my knowledge of roads and areas were pretty poor, but my teacher's house was about 3 kilometers away, and on the same route as our old apartment, so they let me. On the way, there was this pucka stall, a popular, affordable, and delicious snack in our country, where I knew the shopkeeper since childhood. While I was walking home from my teacher's place after fetching the notes, I decided to snack on some of those snacks and have a chat with the kind shopkeeper. The roads were kinda empty at the time, and most of the shops were closed. Only a few passerby were here and there. As I was eating, I felt someone touch my hair suddenly, from behind, which startled me. I had a ponytail. When I turned around, it was an old woman who looked homeless, probably in her 60s or early 70s, smiling at me. She asked me if I could buy her the snacks. At the time, I kind of felt awkward and didn't know how to deny her, so I just said sure. Even though I didn't carry enough money, I just asked the kind shopkeeper to give her my part of the snack that was left. I didn't really mind this, but when I started to leave, she grabbed my right hand tightly and said, "God bless you, child. If I could see my granddaughter, she would be just like you." I was awkwardly smiling and nodding at the time, because I was uncomfortable. I did try to pull my hands away from her grip, politely, but she didn't budge. Then she started talking about how she raised her daughter and son, and how her drunkard but rich husband used to beat both of them up, and pretty much assault them, and how she kept silent about all of it because of the money. And later on, when her children grew up, got a job and got married, her husband got into gambling and lost all his money. went into debt, and died of liver failure. Now she was helpless. She went to her children, but they resented her because they were greedy. So they didn't help her as they were happily settled into their own lives. She told me how she lost everything and shit for the next 2 hours. I did sympathize with her, but at the same time, I had to return home because it was too late. The woman had a very eerie body language. She later on asked me about where I lived, and dumb me at the time told her about that. She asked my dad's name, so I told her, and she said she knew him, and started saying things like how he was a nice man. It wasn't a surprise to me, as Dad is very popular around our locality, as he's a helpful person who participates in charity work and things like that. So I don't know what came over me. I asked her for a description of my dad, and she literally described him, which was the total opposite. She just described my physical characteristics, but the thing is, I look like my mother, and me and my dad don't have similar body skin color, or height, even though I do have his smile and nose. I said okay and tried to pull away my hand, but she didn't budge again. Mind you, she was holding her for 2 hours straight, and while we were talking, she was kind of walking me towards the starting of this dark lane by the road. She now kept on talking about how she wanted to take me to her home and feed me some sweets. That's when it clicked to me. She told me she lost everything, so how was she gonna take me to her home, especially in that dark lane? I got so frightened, I told her I needed to get back home, or my parents would scold me, and actually started using a bit of force to free my wrist from her grip. That's when she literally started dragging me towards the lane. She said, "No, you fed me snacks, now I have to give you a return gift." I pulled my hand away from her grip with full force and straight up ran home. I was breaking out in cold sweats as I reached home, and understandably, my parents were very angry and confused. As I reached home, they did understand what happened when I explained the whole situation to them. I was really scared at the time, but I truly feel guilty. If she was a generally nice old woman, but it was her vibes mainly that was creepy. Me and my mid-20s female went to the local grocery store tonight around 5 p.m. It's winter and getting dark by 5 p.m. where I live. I was in an aisle taking my time, deciding between the options, when this late 20s, early 30s looking guy with light features, glasses, and a scruffy beard comes up right next to me and just stands there. I didn't think much of it or even look at him at first, because I figured, whatever, he's just looking too. But then after a few seconds, I noticed he wasn't moving or doing anything, just standing there. So I looked at him, and he was already staring at me, and for a half a second, I thought he might say something to me. So I stood there for a second, just looking back at him. He didn't say anything, so I just turned and fast walked away. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, that was weird, but whatever. Probably just an awkward guy who doesn't know how to talk to women. Then, not 30 seconds later, I'm in another aisle, and I see him out of the corner of my eye. Coming down the aisle, I'm in. Again, staring right at me. So again, I walked away as fast as I could, and just went right to the self-checkout. While I was at the self-checkout, I'm looking over my shoulders the whole time, making sure he isn't behind me anymore. And he's not. I start walking out of the store, relieved that once again, I was just being paranoid, and I wasn't ever in any real danger. As I'm walking out, I decide to look behind me one more time, and there he is, right fucking behind me. I then notice he has nothing in his hands, no groceries, and he's heading towards the door right on my heels. Without even thinking, I just stop dead in my tracks. I look right at him again. He's already looking at me, and then he puts his head down, looking at his phone, and walks past me out the door. He bought nothing. I'm so scared at this point. My head is spinning. I didn't know what to do. I can see my car because I parked close to the exit, thank God. So I call my fiance and sprint as fast as I can to my car. I jump in, lock the doors, and start looking for this guy. Then I see him. He's aimlessly walking around the parking lot through the cars. He's pretty far away from me at this point, and I have my fiance on the phone, so I'm feeling somewhat safe again. I watched him walk around for another few seconds before I got out of there. I have no idea what this guy was doing or what his motive could have been. Maybe he was just a weird dude who doesn't know how to talk to girls. Or maybe he was a predator with dangerous intentions. Or maybe he thought I looked like an easy prey for a robbery. The thing I really can't wrap my head around is the fact that each time I noticed him, he was already staring at me. He was not discreet at all, and I would think a dangerous predator might be a little more inconspicuous. He also didn't buy anything from the grocery store, which I also can't understand. I was in the store about 5 minutes before I noticed him, so I'm sure he didn't follow me in the store. Am I being paranoid? There's a lot that didn't feel right, so I'm having a really hard time trying to rationalize this experience. Definitely a creepy encounter. This happened not too long ago, although not too crazy. Definitely had me freaking out after it occurred. Probably did not help that I frequent the sub often. So I just moved to a new apartment building, and it was my first time living alone. It was actually my first day, and I had moved my stuff in and headed to school, and was coming home for the evening. My parking is in an underground basement, which was scary as is for the first few days, so I'd always leave my car and book it to the elevator so I could get the fuck out. As I stood waiting, it was taking quite a while for the elevator to come down, and I could hear it beeping on different floors it was stopping at. Once it finally arrived, the doors opened and there's this tall guy that was clearly disheveled on something. The minute I made eye contact with him, my senses went off, and I got the most uneasy feeling. I hesitated, as I was on the last floor, so whenever someone was in the elevator, they were always getting out, and I waited for him to do the same. Instead, he just stood there, staring at me, and I managed to blurt out, "Are you going up?" He mumbled some sort of yeah. Alarm bells were going off, but I thought maybe I was overthinking, so I awkwardly walked in and stood against the wall, as far as I could from him. I asked him what floor, as there was no floor selected, and he stuttered between numbers, and happened to say the floor I was getting off on, which scared me even more. I tried not to panic, but as soon as I entered, I tried to keep my gaze down, but he was just facing and staring at me, with the most uncomfortable look in his eyes. The minute the elevator started going up, he started to shuffle, and was moving towards me, and it ended up stopping on the first floor in the lobby. I was in the left corner near the doors, and he was basically right in front of the door, stepping towards me. When the doors opened, I was honestly freaking the actual hell out, and as soon as the doors slid open, I scooched out and went straight out the doors onto the main street. I stood there for a few minutes with my heart pounding because of how scared I was, and I remember him staring at me confused for a minute, and then he stayed back in the elevator. As the doors closed, I remember there were two guys standing by in the lobby who witnessed the whole thing, and I nervously laughed that I was just creeped out by that guy in the elevator. I believe they were just door dashers, so they just stared at me and were like, "Okay," laughed my ass off. I ended up taking the stairs up and was scared out of my mind. I was praying he was just someone's guest, hence why he was so confused and weird. My dad came to visit me the very next day, and I was telling him how badly that guy freaked me out. That same night, we ran into him again. He was waiting for the elevator, and the minute I saw him, I told my dad and made him take the stairs with me again. Thank God I haven't seen him again, so I'm really hoping he was a guest. But if I ever see an elevator with just one dude in it, I do not take the risk. May have just been me overthinking, but something was definitely not right with him. Thanks everyone for listening. I hope you guys enjoyed those stories. If you did, please leave a like, comment, or subscribe. And I love hearing what you guys have to say in the comments. Makes my day, and I always look forward to replying to you guys' comments. With that said, stay depraved.